right, Shalom. First and foremost, as always, I would like to give all praises, honor, glory, respect, and blessings to Yahweh, Bashem, Yahweh Shai, Bashem, Wachaha, Quadash. Salutations to the Lord's elect on the four corners of the earth, pushing this truth and sincerity while patiently waiting for Yahweh Shai's return. And double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone, which have taught us everything we know through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bashem, Yahweh Shai. Welcome to another podcast. This podcast is going to be about how the Edomites have conquered and divided, deceived, and misled you Spanish-speaking tribes. Now, I have the title like that for a reason, because the Holy Scriptures is a mystery. It's a mystery concerning who the true biblical Israelites are. It is a mystery as to which people belong to each tribe, what nation the people are in the Bible, concerning biblical prophecies, dark sayings, metaphors, and of course, parables. So, let's start off with the Edomites. Who are the Edomites today? Well, when you go to the book of Genesis, the 25th chapter, it tells you that Esau came out red all over like a hairy garment, meaning his whole body was red all over, just like how a garment, the entire color of a garment, the whole garment would basically be the same color. So Esau his whole body was basically red when he came out of Rebekah's womb. Why was he red? Because his blood showed forth underneath his translucent skin. The word translucent means that you're able to see through it. Transparent, translucent, however you want to say it. There's no such thing as a so-called white person. We all have white meat underneath our skin. Whether if you have brown skin, yellow skin, or rather if you have no melanin in your skin. We all have white meat underneath our skin. So the so-called white man, you can see the white meat underneath his transparent or translucent skin, which makes it possible to see his blood rising above the white meat. You know how like when you get a graze in your arm and the graze is so deep that you can see the white meat? And after about 10 to 15 seconds, what do you start to notice? Blood rising above the white meat, pouring out of your graze in your arm or on your knee, you see? So that's the case with Edomites, except instead of the blood pouring out of them, the blood remains inside their body, but it's possible to see their blood underneath their skin. So Esau was born red all over because he was born with no melanin. Hence, when you go into the word Esau, it goes back to the Hebrew word Aishashua, which means wasted away as he. Aisha or Aishashua, which goes back to Aisha, which means wasted or wasted away. And what made Esau wasted away? The fact that he was wasted away of his melanin. Okay, he was born undone, and the Heavenly Father did that on purpose by design. Going back to Cain, when you go into Cain earlier on in the book of Genesis, the Lord put a mark upon Cain, which that mark was the mark of leprosy, because everybody else on the planet during the time of Adam and Eve had brown skin and woolly hair. So by plaguing Cain with leprosy, he would be easily distinguishable amongst all of the other people on the planet. And people would know that if you see a man with leprosy, you would know that this man was a murderer, you know. He envied his brother and killed him out of spite, jealousy, envy. Cain did not kill his brother, he murdered his brother. Okay, there's a difference between murder and kill. When you kill somebody, you take somebody's life for a justifiable reason. And that's according to the scriptures. If a man commits adultery with your wife, you're justified in taking his life, because the punishment for adultery, according to Leviticus, the 20th chapter, is death. Now, I'm not saying, you practice that in this society, because Esau will throw you under the bus. He will throw you under the jail. Okay, so, we know that when you look at the average so-called white person, especially the most common thing that causes their blood to show forth through their skin is when they stand out in a hot blazing sun. When they're out in a hot blazing sun and the sun is beaming on them, they start to turn red. Why do they start to turn red? Because their blood begins to show forth above the white meat underneath their translucent skin or their transparent skin. Okay, so furthermore, when you go to the book of Job, chapter 9, verse 24, it tells you that the earth is given into the hands of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judges thereof, and if not, where and who is he? So we know that in Genesis, the 27th chapter, Esau was born. In Genesis, the 27th chapter, Isaac blessed Esau with the sword and with the fatness of the earth. So when it says the earth is given into the hands of the wicked, we know that Esau predominantly will be the one, especially after the flood, giving birth to who would be especially known as the wicked throughout the Holy Scriptures, okay? In this generation, who are the top dollars, who are the top rulers on this planet? Who are the top rulers on this planet in this present time, in this generation? The so-called elites are. And guess what? They are Edomites. And we can identify that they are Edomites via biblical prophecy. Biblical prophecy is how we're able to identify who the Edomites are today. The earth is given into the hands of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judges thereof. When you go into a Christian church, who do you see? You see an image. You see an image of a so-called Messiah that's supposed to resemble the so-called Messiah, right? An image that basically depicts a so-called white person. You don't see the image of a gook. You don't see the image of a African. You don't see the image of a dot-head East Indian. You don't see the image of a Arabian. You don't see the image of a slender-eyed Japanese person. You don't see the image of a Samoan, a Hawaiian, a Mauian, which are the Japhetic people. You don't see that. You see a depiction of a so-called white person. Why? Because in Job 9 verse 24, it tells you that he will cover the faces, which when you go into that word cover, okay, it goes into iconoclasm, which iconoclasm is where you get the destruction of an image. So we know that the Edomites today will be the self-proclaimed white man. Now, as for you Spanish-speaking tribes, okay, what do I mean by the Spanish-speaking tribes? Well, first and foremost, I'm talking to you Israelites, okay? When the Spaniards, when they came to the Americas, okay, they namely attacked and conquered the southwestern parts of America. Okay? They conquered the southwestern parts of America. Okay, and I believe the conquistadors had a hand in that conquest as well, committing slaughter and genocide upon you Mexicans from the tribe of Issachar, okay, upon you Puerto Ricans, because you Puerto Ricans, you used to live over here in the Americas as well. Remember? They used to call you Taino Indians. So you Puerto Ricans, Taino Indians from the tribe of Ephraim, you used to dwell over here in America, okay? The so-called Seminole Indians from the tribe of Reuben, Gad from the tribe of the so-called North American Indians from the tribe of Gad. Okay, this land belonged to y'all. Okay, Gad namely broke up into, different tribes such as the Choctaws, the Cherokees, the Chickasaws, if I'm saying that correctly. And I'm pretty sure there's other ones. Cherokee is the most commonly known ones. But you see, when the Spaniards and the English Dutch mercenaries, I believe, was responsible for taking down Gad. But I know the Spaniards conquered, and I believe the conquistadors had a hand in it as well, had conquered you Mexicans, okay, and you Puerto Ricans. The Spaniards, okay, they conquered you Mexicans and you Puerto Ricans. They slaughtered you off, and then after they killed you off, after they murdered you off, okay, they pushed y'all down southward. That's why a lot of you Puerto Ricans live on a island or archipelago called Puerto Rico, which means rich port. Okay, Rico, which is Spanish for rich, and Puerto or Puerta, which means port, Spanish for port, Puerto Rico. Okay, but as for you so-called Mexicans from the tribe of Issachar, okay, after they conquered y'all and deleted y'all off, they pushed y'all down into a single portion southward of America, southwestward of America, and they call that place Mexico. They even changed the pronunciation of it because originally it was called Mexico, okay? Okay, it was called Mexico. And please excuse me, it's pouring down out here right now. I wonder if I can get in through this door until the rain lets up a little. Or maybe I can walk through the mall here. But yeah, they changed the pronunciation of it, okay? Instead of Mexico, they called it, instead of Mexico, because the X and the C is supposed to be silent in the pronunciation, they changed it to Mexico. And then they changed the name of all of the other neighboring states where y'all were living at. They changed the name of those areas to Arizona, California, Wisconsin. You see, Texas. Texas was also a part of Mexico. Yeah, remember? So, you Spanish-speaking tribes, talking about you Ephraimites from the tribe of Ephraim, you Puerto Ricans from the tribe of Ephraim, and you Mexicans from the tribe of Issachar. Y'all forgot about all that dark history and all of the horrible atrocities that happened to y'all when Esau came to your land, slaughtered you off, okay? R-A-P-E-D, your women, they ravaged your women, okay? They took your women away from you, okay? While you were still alive, they R-A-P-E-D, your woman, right in front of you. And then when they was done R-A-P ing her, right? They pretty much murdered her in front of you, probably tortured her, sliced her head off, snapped her neck, and then they took your children, and guess what? They slaughtered them in front of you. And all you could do was sit there helplessly and cry, cry in agony and pain as you was helpless to do anything because you was tied up, you was stripped naked. And then after they was done with your wife and your children, guess what? They probably performed a bucket breaking on you because Esau's a sick fuck, man. They probably performed a bucket breaking on you. And then when they was done torturing you, they put your ass to death. So then when you came back in a reincarnation, you was lied to being raised in this society, and they told you that, you came out of the Edomites, you Mexicans, you come from so-called white people, and that's a goddamn lie, okay? You Mexicans come from Jacob. You Mexicans come from Jacob in the Holy Scriptures, okay? Y'all are you so-called Mexicans, you Puerto Ricans, y'all are descendants of Jacob. Okay? Okay? So-called white people come from the line of Esau. When you read Genesis, the 36th chapter, and the first verse, what does it say? It reads, "Now these are the generations of Esau, who is Edom." So you see, the reason why you Mexicans are living in a small portion of Mexico, which is called Mexico today, is because y'all were slaughtered off. Okay, Esau committed genocide against your tribe, and then after they completely conquered y'all and broke y'all down, they pushed y'all back into a small area and named it Mexico. Okay, they changed the pronunciation of it because it used to be pronounced Mexico, okay, but they said, nah, nigga, we calling this Mexico. Okay, they pretty much said, fuck Mexico. We call this Mexico. It's Mexico, nigga. You ain't gonna do, and that's another thing. Y'all ain't doing shit about Esau, man. But you know what? Y'all was born and raised in this society. Y'all was miseducated. Y'all was misled. And then y'all were taught that the so-called Negro, the Southern Kingdom, which will be Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, so-called Negroes come from the tribe of Judah. Haitians come from the tribe of Levi. And so-called Jamaicans or so-called West Indians come from the tribe of Benjamin. Okay, you Spanish-speaking tribes, talking about you Mexicans and you Puerto Ricans, y'all were taught that the dark-skinned man of the same nation as you, because you so-called Mexicans, you are Israelites, just like the so-called Negro, and the so-called North American Indians are Israelites. Okay, you Mexicans and you Puerto Ricans, y'all are Israelites. You Latinos, y'all are Israelites. But y'all were born and raised in this society and misled in the educational system, and y'all was taught that anybody with brown skin and woolly hair is your enemy, and y'all literally soaked that shit up like a sponge. You became dirty and defiled like a sponge that was used to clean out the inside of a dirty ass toilet bowl full of shit stains and piss. Now you're all filthy and dirty with all this miseducation that's been put in your head. Now your eye is evil towards us because the so-called white man told you that we were your enemies. And a lot of y'all wanted to believe that, because a lot of y'all wanted to believe that y'all really come from so-called white people. And don't get me wrong, some of you so-called Mexicans do come from so-called white people, because when the conquistadors and the Spaniards killed y'all off, they preserved some of the women of your tribes, and pretty much they had sex with your women. Okay, because a lot of y'all women was espoused to y'all, married to y'all, right? Through sex, which is the covenant was made between y'all. But when the Spaniards and the conquistadors took you in front of your wife and children, they murdered you in front of your wife and children. They pretty much took your wife, you know, they pretty much smashed her, and children came out of those. And when you read the book of Matthew, Yahweh Shai spoke about the wheat and the tares. Now you got the physical tares, and then you got the spiritual tares. But I'm not here to talk about the spiritual tares. So I'm going to focus on the physical tares, because the tares look just like the wheat. You know? So you got a lot of people down in Mexico that look like Mexicans, but they're not Mexicans, they're Edomites. Their line goes back to Esau. Because somewhere down the line, going way back to the 16th century, okay, a long ass line of tares, a long ass lineage of tares came out of those Issacharite women, those Mexican women. Same thing happened with the Puerto Rican women. Same thing happened with the Puerto Ricans, okay? Okay, when they slaughtered off, when they committed genocide against the Puerto Ricans, they would take the man in front of his wife and children. They would murder him in front of his wife, right? And in some cases, they would even have sex with his wife right in front of him while he was still alive, where he could see it. And then after they was done smashing his wife right in front of him, where he could do nothing about it because he was tied up more than likely, right? They murdered him. They ended his life. But they kept the woman alive. Why? So she could give birth to his children. And you better best believe that woman's life was a living hell, because her life was pretty much ruined. Her life was no longer the same, because now she ended up being the wife of an unknown Spanish-speaking a stranger. So look, man, it's the year 2025, okay? If you're a Mexican, if you're a Puerto Rican, if you still think that the Southern Kingdom, the so-called Negro, Haitians, and West Indians, if you think that we're still your enemies, then you're just a motherfucking retard, okay? Excuse my blah, 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 blah. But I gotta put it like that. A lot of y'all are just a bunch of motherfucking retards, man. Okay? You're too fucking stupid to live, in other words. Because for decades, starting with our apostles on down, we've been telling y'all that you Mexicans and you so-called Puerto Ricans, y'all are of the same nation as we are, okay? The so-called Negro, Latino, and Native Indians come out of Jacob, written and spoken of in the book of Genesis, from the 25th chapter on up, okay? We come out of the line of Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. Okay, you Puerto Ricans and you Mexicans, y'all are our people. We're not your enemies, okay? We're not your enemies. The Edomites are your enemies. They're the ones who ruined your fucking life, okay? They're the ones who came through, slaughtered you off, took all your money, your gold, your silver, your resources. Okay? They turned your 6, 7, and 8-year-old children into sex slaves. They turned your women into sex slaves. Okay? They was lynching and torturing y'all in front of masses of people. We never did any of those things to y'all. But again, it's all because of that educational system. Okay? Y'all have been miseducated and misled. And here we are, the Lord have raised up prophets to proclaim the truth to you, Latino tribes. As Paul have said, I have not shunned to declare unto you all the counsel of the Lord. A part of the counsel of the Lord is revealing to our people who they are according to the Holy Scriptures. So y'all have been misled and lied to in these educational centers, and y'all been taught to believe that the Southern Kingdom are not of your nation, that y'all really come from Edomites, and that we are your enemies. Which, like I said, there are tares among y'all, because according to Numbers 1 verse 18, your nationality is based on who your father is. Okay? So who your father line go back to on your father's side determines what nationality you are. So you got a lot of so-called Mexicans down there in Mexico. They look like Mexicans, but they're really tares, because their line goes back to one of your slave masters, which were Edomites. Okay? But as for you actual so-called Mexicans, just got to cross the street right here. But as for you actual so-called Mexicans, okay, whose line goes back to Jacob, you are of our nation, okay? You don't go back to so-called white people. Your line goes back to Jacob. Okay, spoken of in the book of Genesis, whose name was changed to Israel. So y'all, you so-called Puerto Ricans and Mexicans, y'all were Israelites just like us. But the reason why they miseducated, because that miseducation that was done to you Latino tribes, it was not done by mistake. It was not a coincidence. They did it on purpose, because it was a divide and conquer strategy. You ever heard of the term divide and conquer? Esau knows that the nation of Israel as a whole is a force to be reckoned with. That's why he used divide and conquer techniques, divide and conquer strategies. He did that on purpose by design to pit y'all against us. When really, we are the same people. We come from the same nation. When I say we are the same people, I mean as in we come from the same nation of people. Okay, so if you Spanish-speaking tribes, you so-called Latino tribes, that is, if y'all don't wake up, if y'all don't snap out of that that spell that Esau put y'all under, y'all think that y'all come from Spanish people, and y'all don't. If y'all don't snap out of it, man, you're gonna perish with this Edomite when the day of judgment comes, in which the day of judgment draws near. With that, I'm gonna say shalom to the elect. DTA Abad Babal.